She said she needed space, so she moved into my partner's $8 million penthouse on Leonard Street. I didn't stop her. I let them build everything, just so I could take it back overnight. I saw them on the security feed at 2:16 a.m. Emily stepped out of the black Tesla in front of 56 Leonard Street, that jagged glass tower where New York's richest like to vanish above the city. She wore the red coat I bought her, and she kissed Dylan Hart like she'd never worn my ring. My wife, my business partner, the woman and the man who helped me build everything. 12 hours earlier, she'd been in our kitchen. Same Tribeca zip code, different view, stirring untouched tea, eyes puffy from fake crying. "I need space, Nathan," she said. "This isn't about Dylan, I swear." I nodded and said nothing, because by then I already knew about the emails, the backdated asset transfers, the whisper campaign that painted me as burnt out. What they didn't know was that I had already pulled the real blueprint, filed under my name, hidden behind 6 LLCs, all legal, all lethal. The next morning, she was gone, and I called Grace Liang, my attorney. "Grace," I said, watching the sunlight hit the empty side of the bed. "They've moved in. Are you ready?" "Not yet," I said. "Let them paint the walls first. Then I'll pull the floor out." She thought she was starting a new life in his condo. But that building, that company, that empire, I still owned the land beneath all of it. I met Dylan at 434 Broadway, our shared office space in Soho, where Cole and Hart Technologies was born from 2 laptops, 4 Red Bulls, and 1 sleepless friendship. Now it had 120 employees, $300 million in valuation, and a co-founder ready to cut me out with a handshake. "It's not personal, man," he said, pouring himself coffee in the glass-walled conference room. "You've been burnt out for months. Everyone sees it." I stared at him across the table, the same table we used to sketch neural nets and pitch decks. Now he used it to slide across a buyout agreement. He'd prepped it well. Valuation cap, structured payout, NDAs, voting rights, all by the book. He even offered me equity in a shell company. "Passive role, long-term wealth, you win either way," he said. I didn't laugh, because this wasn't a loss. This was my invitation into the second act. I flipped through the contract slowly. Every word he'd written had already been rewritten by Grace Liang 2 weeks prior. What Dylan didn't know, the real IP was never registered under Cole and Hart Technologies. The patents, the AI models, the trademarked predictive engine, all filed under ArcLight Systems LLC, a quiet Nevada entity owned by a trust. My trust. I signed, smiling, letting him believe he'd won. "It's your show now," I said. "Make it legendary." He clapped my back like a victorious gladiator. "I will, brother." Brother, how fitting. He had no idea I'd just made him CEO of someone else's castle. He thought I walked away with a check, but I walked away with the keys. And when the time came, I'd lock him out. They thought I'd disappeared. I was just waiting for the scaffolding to rise so I could kick it out from under them. 6 weeks after I signed the papers, I watched them walk onto the stage at the New York Times Tech Forum in Hudson Yards. Dylan in a navy tuxedo jacket, Emily in a pearl white blazer dress, smiling, unified, iconic. Visionaries, the moderator called them, partners in business and in life. The crowd clapped. I didn't. I just adjusted the volume on my earbuds and listened. "We're building the next generation of predictive intelligence," Dylan told the crowd, and it all started with a decision to evolve. He glanced at Emily. She squeezed his hand. They were in love, in power, in deep. Behind the curtain, the company was growing fast. They moved to a new HQ in Flatiron, raised $40 million from a European VC, signed 3 enterprise AI licensing deals. Every headline read, Cole and Hart 2.0. New power, couple of tech. They'd renamed the company Hart Vision. My name wiped clean. Or so they thought. Because what they didn't know was that Hart Vision was still powered by ArcLight IP, the foundational model we built 3 years ago. The one Emily had never read the licensing clause on, the one Dylan never double-checked before launching their big relaunch. And every time they deployed it, ArcLight Systems got a ping. My ping. I didn't stop them. Not yet. Let them build higher, I told Grace. The higher they go, the harder they'll feel the drop. They raised the tower in my absence. What they didn't know was I still owned the land it stood on. Every million they raised was built on code they didn't own. And one clause, just one, would bring it all down. They called it a landmark moment. Series C, $100 million valuation. Press releases, photo ops, a feature in TechCrunch. Hart Vision was now officially the future of ethical AI. What a joke. I watched the pitch from a secure live stream. They were at Hudson Square, inside a glass boardroom with 5 investors from Westfield Capital. Emily handled the narrative. Dylan ran the deck. They spoke like true founders, like the ones who built the foundation. Except they didn't. I did, and what they were standing on was mine. All proprietary code is original and owned in full, Emily said confidently, sliding across the licensing breakdown. Except it wasn't. What no one at that table knew was this. 2 weeks before they rebranded as Hart Vision, Dylan copied the ArcLight backend to a new deployment server. He thought he was moving fast. What he triggered instead was a legal clause. Clause 19B in the ArcLight license. Unauthorized deployment or duplication of core systems activates full revocation of commercial rights and imposes retroactive financial penalties. In other words, I could seize every dollar earned from it. Not now, but when the time was right. What happens if they hit 200 Meta's valuation? Grace asked me over lunch in Midtown. Then, I said, they'll be worth seizing. They thought they were scaling fast. They were just inflating the value of something I already owned. She made the cover of Forbes, but the algorithm behind her smile still had my name buried in the source code. They flew her out in a private helicopter. Emily Cole, newly rebranded as Emily Hart, stepped onto the rooftop of Forbes HQ in Jersey City like a queen returning to her throne. Hair flawless, smile camera ready, wearing a white Alexander McQueen suit and a subtle diamond H necklace. The headline, "The New Face of AI, Emily Hart and Her Rise from Silence to Power." The article praised her leadership, resilience, and unbreakable instincts. They called her a pioneer of female-led tech. No one asked whose tech she led. That same day, I got a package delivered to my law firm. Inside, an official certificate from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Patent, NER 11-802-391. Predictive Behavioral Modeling Engine, PBME. Filed 2 years ago. Owner, ArcLight Systems, LLC. Inventor, Nathaniel Cole. Grace walked into my office with the certificate in hand. "Your name's still on everything," she said, placing it beside the Forbes magazine. I didn't look at the cover. I looked at the filing stamp. That engine, the one powering Hart Vision's predictive product, was still protected under federal law, meaning every dollar earned off it, every pitch, every client, every demo, technically mine. "They should have changed the engine," Grace said. "They were too arrogant to rebuild." "Exactly," I replied. "They didn't want to innovate, they wanted to inherit. And what's the one thing about inheritance? It can be revoked." She smiled for the camera like she'd conquered me, but my signature was printed inside every line of code she ran that day. That, they called it the deal of the decade. But buried in the contract was the clause that gave it all back to me. The room was filled with champagne, signatures, and carefully staged cameras. Heart Vision had just signed a $1.1 billion global partnership with Alaris Corp, a European conglomerate. It was the kind of deal that rewrites resumes and IPO timelines. Dylan shook hands with the CEO of Alaris. Emily wiped a tear, the emotional, polished face of female-founded AI. They posed together at the top floor of Hudson Yards Business Tower, surrounded by attorneys and tech media. "This is the future," Dylan said proudly. "A clean engine, a clean vision, clean ownership." I almost applauded. Almost. Because 5 weeks earlier, Grace and I had submitted a private legal memo to Alaris Corp's due diligence team. It contained just one note: "Please verify IP integrity." Attached, patent history and cross-licensing records from ArcLight Systems LLC. Alaris read it, and they panicked until I offered them a clause, Clause 41D. In the event of any IP dispute involving core technologies, all ownership rights and liabilities revert to original patent holders, as verified in Exhibit B. Exhibit B was a sealed file, opened only if I pressed send, which meant the moment Heart Vision tripped a legal wire, Alaris could take every line of code, every asset, and hand them straight to me. Not because they wanted to, but because the contract told them to. "It's like setting a grenade in their briefcase," Grace said, "and letting them carry it to the bank." "Not a grenade," I replied, "a dead man's switch. The moment they cross the line, the whole thing triggers back to me." Emily and Dylan celebrated for the cameras that day. They smiled like billionaires. But behind those signatures, they'd just signed their empire back to me. They thought I was out of the game, but I'd been writing the rules the whole time. At 2:03 a.m., every password they had stopped working. The empire they stole? I took it back with a single line of code. It happened on a Tuesday night. No press, no lawyers, no ceremony, just one silent command, deployed at 2:03 a.m. from a secure server in Newark, New Jersey, the one Dylan didn't know I still owned. The command was called Revoke Access GE Root All. Grace watched from across my desk as I hit enter. By 2:05 a.m., Dylan's login credentials failed. By 2:07, Emily's biometric keycard was invalid. So was her email, her admin console, her digital signature on the Alaris deal. By 2:10, the CTO messaged Dylan, "Sir, we're locked out of the back end. The core engine's gone read-only. We can't even access user data." By the time the Heart Vision team arrived at HQ in Flatiron, the office was chaos. Nothing worked, no systems, no servers, no internal tools. The legal team was screaming into phones. The engineers were frozen, and Dylan was gone. He called me at 2:28 a.m. I let it ring. Grace handed me a report. Back-end rollback complete. Control reassigned to ArcLight Master System. Patents enforced. Clause 41D triggered. Alaris notified. I read it like a morning newspaper. Then I opened a draft email, pre-written for months. Subject line: IP breach detected. Activation of reversion clause 41D. Attached: the original patent. Deployment logs. Video footage of Dylan's illegal code migration. Time-stamped legal authority. From Grace I hit send. To Alaris Corp. Legal European Division. By sunrise, it was done. They weren't just locked out of the system. They were locked out of their own company. They built an empire on stolen code. And I took it all back while they slept. They took my seat at the table. So I called a vote and took the whole damn table back. The boardroom at 79 Madison Avenue was as cold as I remembered. 12 chairs, 2 carafes of untouched coffee, 1 empty seat, mine, at the head of the table. Until now. Dylan sat at the far end, arms folded, voice tight. This is ridiculous. You don't even work here anymore. I smiled. That's not what Delaware corporate law says. Emily glanced nervously at the board. She looked tired. This wasn't the camera-ready version of her. This was the real Emily, brittle behind the brand. The general counsel cleared her throat. Based on current shareholder disclosures, Mr. Cole holds controlling interest through layered trusts and shadow equity units. That's impossible, Dylan snapped. It's not, I said. You signed the dilution clauses yourself, remember? Page 47, right after the champagne. They'd been so busy celebrating the Alaris deal that they never saw the quiet transfer of voting power. I'd used 6 offshore LLCs, 3 angel proxies, and 1 dead lawyer's signature. By the time the paperwork hit the SEC, it was already too late. Let's proceed, said the chairwoman. A simple vote. Motion to remove Dylan Hart as acting CEO. Passed 7-3. Motion to remove Emily Hart as strategic director. Passed 6-4. Motion to reinstate Nathan Cole as interim CEO. Passed 8-2. Emily stood up. You can't do this. I stood too. You already did. I'm just cleaning it up. They took everything from me, so I let them think they'd won. Until I stood at the top of what they built and called it mine again. They ran to the press, to the lawyers, to the public. But the world doesn't follow noise. It follows power. 2 days after the board vote, Emily released a video. The truth behind Hart Vision's hostile takeover. She was seated on a gray couch in a Brooklyn apartment. No makeup, soft lighting, the kind of raw vulnerability her PR firm charged $20,000 to fake. I was pushed out by a man who couldn't accept success, she said, voice trembling. This isn't justice, it's ego. The video got 12 million views in 48 hours. Dylan followed up with a Medium article. The truth they won't print. How I built Hart Vision and lost it overnight. They posted tweets, filed injunctions, threatened lawsuits, and no one cared. Why? Because the people they were shouting at were already watching me. I held the patents, I held the platform, I held the new roadmap. And more importantly, I didn't say a word. While they fumbled through media tantrums, I held a quiet press conference at a midtown venue on 42nd Street. No tears, no drama, just results. Hart Vision has stabilized its executive structure, I said. All systems are secure. Product rollouts remain on schedule. 10 minutes, no questions. Wall Street nodded. That day, the Hart Vision stock rose 17%. And that was the day the world moved on. They screamed into the void. But the world listens to whoever signs the checks. And this time, that was me. She didn't come back to say sorry. She came to take one final shot. And I let her pull the trigger. She showed up at 1:11 a.m. I watched her on the doorcam feed, standing outside the penthouse I never left, the same one she used to call home. She still had the code. I never changed it, because I always knew she'd be back. She didn't knock. She walked in like she belonged, hair wet from the rain, no coat, no pretense, just fury under designer skin. You think you've won, Emily said. You think this is over. I poured a second glass of bourbon and slid it across the counter. If I thought it was over, I said, you wouldn't be here. She didn't sit. She pulled out a flash drive and tossed it on the counter. You built the engine, but we made the upgrades. That drive has our new model, the one you don't own. I took the drive, twirled it in my fingers. Nice move, I said, but you're 6 months late. I walked her to the wall display, tapped on a smart screen. 4 graphs appeared, side-by-side benchmarks. Your new model I said. It's already integrated 6 months ago, under a silent partnership you never knew existed. Her face tightened. That's impossible. No, that's leverage. She stepped closer. I loved you once. No, I said. You loved the idea of winning next to me, until you thought you could win without me. She looked like she might break, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled. You forgot one thing. What's that? I'm not done yet. Then she left. The door closed behind her, and I stood there, flash drive in one hand, bourbon in the other, knowing this wasn't the final act. Not yet. She walked away empty-handed, but I saw it in her eyes. She still had one card left. I built the empire. She tried to steal it, but the final knife came from the man I once called brother. 3 days passed. Emily went silent. No press, no threats, no lawyers, just silence, which coming from her was the loudest warning. Then came the email. Encrypted. No subject, no name, just one attachment. A transfer contract, signed by Dylan Hart, filed 2 months ago. Assets sold, Hart Vision's upcoming proprietary AI model. Buyer, Caldera Analytics, one of our fiercest rivals in the European defense sector. Value, 22 million off books, unauthorized, and absolutely real. Why would Dylan sell them your next-gen prototype? Grace asked, staring at the metadata. He didn't sell it to screw me, I said. He sold it to burn us both. Turns out, Dylan wasn't in hiding. He was quietly negotiating with our enemies, not just to profit, but to destroy what neither of us could have. Emily didn't know. She thought she was still at war with me. She didn't realize the man standing behind her had already thrown a match at the bridge. The code Dylan sold wasn't even clean. It contained old ArcLight DNA, a landmine hidden in the core framework, meaning once Caldera activated it, they'd be in violation of federal IP law. And guess who gets pulled into the lawsuit? Not Dylan. Me. Because on paper, I was the license owner. He's not trying to win, I said quietly. He's trying to salt the earth. She betrayed me for power, but he betrayed us both for revenge. And now, I had one move left to make. They wanted the empire. They can have the ashes. I walked away with the only thing that mattered. Control. I could have sued Dylan, dragged Caldera through international courts, pulled Emily down with them. But that would mean staying in a war that never ends. And I was done. Instead, I made one final move. I called Grace. Activate the dissolution clause, I said. The whole company? She asked. Yes. Hart Vision. Burn it. Quietly. We filed it through a holding shell. ArcLight Tier 4 Ltd. A clause buried inside the master ownership chain. Within 48 hours, the following happened. Hart Vision's core patent pool was revoked. All external licensing went null. Every product running ArcLight code went dark, and all liabilities, including Dylan's stolen deal, reverted to him. Personally, Caldera threatened to sue. I sent them the patent logs. They settled, out of court. Emily? She released one last post. I gave my life to build something, and he burned it for pride. It got likes, but not support. People were tired of her version of truth. And me? I didn't post anything. I didn't hold a press conference, didn't write a book, didn't sell my side. I just walked into 233 Spring Street, the private office where ArcLight Holdings sat under 5 other names, logged into a console, and moved the only remaining asset, ArcLight Predictive Core, into a cold server vault. Not to sell, not to use, just to own. I sat by the window, looking down at the city that once tried to bury me, and I smiled. They had my name scrubbed from headlines, but my signature lives in every system they ever touched. They built my empire for me, and I let them. They played the game to win. I played it to end it.